Thank you for joining me for training today. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome in. Welcome in. We are going to talk about residential unimproved property today. I'm going to show you how to search for this property on the MLS, and I'm also going to show you the actual contract for unimproved property and work our way through that top to bottom. Okay. Unimproved property literally means property that's not improved, hence the name unimproved property. So, to give you a frame of reference, what we're talking about is literally vacant land. And on the residential side of things, when you're looking at new construction homes and you're working with the builder or not, typically the lender will tell that buyer, hey, you need to put back X amount of dollars per month for the next year because the taxes through the county are based on the unimproved property currently, because during that year that house was being built, the house was still being built, so it wasn't improved yet. Once the house is complete, then now it's improved property or residential property. Okay, so that's when the contract changes, whether it's a new construction, incomplete, complete, or residential resale, commercial, whatever, what have you. But if it's just land all by itself, then it's going to be unimproved property, specifically, again, residential. So now the difference between an unimproved property and a farm and ranch contract, farm and ranch, either one could actually be tons of acreage, by the way. Either one could be acreage, but the difference is going to be what it's used for. So if you have a farm and ranch contract, that means there's already animals on this property. There's literally a ranch on the property. There's literally farming equipment, plows, tractors, things that are in the mix there. Sometimes a barn might be on that property. Farm and ranch, okay? But unimproved property is literally just the vacant land that you see going down Highway 45, Highway 20, Highway 30, vacant land. Okay, so I'm actually going to break down the contract first because that will take the longest amount of time. And then we'll take a few minutes at the end and run through how to find these properties on the MLS. Okay. I'm going to share my screen with you. So I'm already in zip form. So I already have this document pulled up. If you need a quick recap on how to get to this document, I would start a new transaction and name it training, click residential. It'll ask for a template. Don't pick a template. You can add a form and you're looking for the unimproved property contract and you can add it on the right. Or at the very top of zip forms, it says forms at the top and you can just put the name of the form in there and it'll be there. Okay, so paragraph 1, we're talking about our parties, seller and the buyer. Simple as pie. We've done this a million times with all of our other contracts, right? If you're working with the seller, their name should be on the tax form. If you're working with a buyer, you should have their names and everything checked out through the buyer rep agreement and through the whoever is doing your third party financing. The property information, excuse me, whether it's a lot, block, the legal description, the county, the city, all of that stuff is in the tax. So we got paragraph 1 and 2. Paragraph 3, we're specifically talking about price here. Okay. Now, if you notice, this is the first thing that's a little bit, well, the first thing that's actually different is going to be paragraph 2, because in paragraph 2 with the residential contract, it talks about improvements and it talks about accessories and exclusions, things like that. It's unimproved property. So there are no improvements, there are no accessories, there are no exclusions. It's just the land. So that's why that's not here. Okay. Now, it does remind you if there are any minerals, oils, or gas to use the mineral oil rights addendum. But, that's only if it actually applies to that property. Now, with your sales price, this is something else that changes. Okay. So A plus B equals C. Okay. So your cash portion, let's just say the cash was 10,000 and then our loan amount is 90,000. A plus B equals C. So I'm putting a down payment of 10,000. I'm taking a loan out for 90,000 to equal $100,000 sales price. Okay. Well, we can say I'm using third party financing, and there you go. Now, paragraph D is going to be the first part where it gets a little interesting. So I'm going to read it out to you. The sales price will or will not be adjusted based on the survey required in paragraph 6C. If the sales price is adjusted, the sales price will be adjusted based on the difference between this many acres and the acreage set forth in the survey required by paragraph 6C. The difference in acreage increased either increase or decrease, shall be multiplied by the sum of this per acre. Okay. So let me break that down first before I get to this bottom half. Okay. So what they're talking about is, if you notice on some of the land signs that you've probably driven by once upon a time, right? It always says stuff like plus or minus 5 acres. That means that we really don't know how much land is here. We just know it's close to 5 acres. So when you actually get that survey, it could be 5.0135 acres. It could be 4.87632 acres, but it's plus or minus 5 acres. So what this is saying is, are we going to adjust the price based on the survey, yes or no? So for example, if I'm buying land for $1,000 per acre, and I find out that it's plus, and it's a plus or minus 5 acre situation, so I should be paying $5,000 for all 5 acres in this example, right? So if I find out on the survey that it's really 4.875 acres, that means I only owe you $4,800. $4,875. So most of the time, the buyer does want things to be adjusted per that survey. Now, on the flip side, though, what if it's 5.134 acres? That's $5,134 because I'm paying $1,000 per acre. So the seller and the buyer have to agree, are we going to have the price adjust or not based on that survey? Okay, that's the first step. Now, the second step, again, it says if the sales price is going to be adjusted, the sales price will be adjusted based on the difference between this many acres and the acreage set forth in the survey required by paragraph 6. So if there's an adjustment within the acres, we have to be talking about a difference between, let's say, 2 acres. So I said it was 5 acres, but what if it came out to be 4.6? Okay, so because it is an adjustment between the difference between the two, then that's what we're basing everything on. Okay. Now the difference in acreage between that, we're gonna multiply that difference by this sum. Okay, so I'm charging $1,000 per acre. So for every acre that gets multiplied in by the sum, I'm going to add this much money back in. So if it is 5.2 acres, there's no question that now you owe me $5,200 versus just 5,000 straight. Okay. Now the next part, if the sales price is adjusted by more than 10%, either party may terminate this contract by providing written notice within 4 days. After terminating, the party receives receives a survey. If neither party terminates this contract, or if the variance is 10% or less, the adjustment will be made in the amount in 3A or 3B proportionately to 3A, 3B. Okay, so probably your cash. I'm sorry, in 3A, 3B with the cash here. Okay, so we're basically just saying, after terminating, if nobody decides to terminate, the variance, if no one decides to terminate, or if there's a variance of 10% more or less, then we're going to make that change in the amount of what we put up here. Okay, so this is the difference in the land or unimproved property contract when it comes to the price, because again, you have to take into account that there may or may not be more or less land than you think you're buying, but you won't know that without a survey. Excuse me again, sorry. Okay, so now leases. So in a 1 to 4 family contract, the leases are talking about fixture leases, we're talking about residential leases, we're talking about natural leases, all that stuff. When we're talking about unimproved property, we're only talking about natural leases. Okay. So those natural leases, we're talking geothermal, mineral, water, wind, other natural resources, things like that. If you see if you see a lease on a property for so sorry. If you see a lease on a property for like crops or animals or anything like that, again, this is the wrong contract. It would be farm and ranch. Okay, that would be farm and ranch. Now, with your natural resources, seller is or is not party to that natural resource. So, for example, the land that I live on, my land would be considered farm and ranch at this point. Okay, because there is a single family home on here, and the lease that I have on my land is for my hay. Okay, so let's just say this is still going to be unimproved property, just to give you an example. So what this is saying is that the seller is or is not a party to that lease. So I could say The lease, because my parents live on this land too. The lease is between my parents and my hey guy. I'm selling my property, but I'm actually not a party to this lease. The lease has my parents' name on it and it has the hey guy's name on it. Sometimes when people are leasing land or they've purchased land that was already in a lease, they're not a party to that lease, but they still do abide by the lease. Okay, so that's what we're talking about here. Seller is or is not a party to that natural lease. And again, it could be, a wind lease, it could be a water, it could be a well on the property and someone's leasing the water out of that. It could be anything, right? Geothermal again, or it could be mineral rights. Okay. And if you're not an actual party to that lease, that's what we're talking about here. Now, if you are a party to the lease, the seller needs to deliver a copy, whether you are or not, the seller needs to deliver copies of all the leases, all the information. And if you don't, there's a certain amount of days that the buyer can go ahead and terminate. Okay. Now, this part, we're talking about paragraph 5 here. This actually doesn't change anything. Paragraph 5 is the same as it is in any contract. We're talking about our earnest and option money. We're talking about delivering earnest and option money and how the third day can't be on a Saturday, Sunday, or holiday. How many option days do you want? What happens if you don't turn that money in? Paragraph 5 has not changed throughout the contracts. Okay, so we are good there. Paragraph 6 is actually not different either, because we're still talking about all the title references here. Who's going to pay for the title policy, buyer or seller? Where's the title policy being issued out by? Who's going to have the amended shortages read, buyer or seller? Do you want it? Do you not want it? All of this stuff has not changed. The commitment, all that kind of stuff, again, it has not changed. Our survey information has not changed. Either one's not required, either the buyer is going to buy one, either the seller is going to buy one, or the seller is going to provide one. Either way. Okay, so those are our options here. Our objections are the same as any other contract. Is the land that you're buying in an HOA or not? That is definitely possible. There are tons of subdivisions, if you will, that will have 2-acre lots, but you have to hire your own private builder. So that HOA will they'll go ahead and plat and subdivide the land like a builder does, have a whole map which plots of land are sold, whatever. They'll have their approved private builders, or you can bring your own and they just have to go through a process, but you still have to fill in this contract here, and you have to mark, is it or is it not part of an HOA, and then disclose all that information per the HOA. Now the 11 reasons as to why you would fulfill this section here in 12 and actually put information here as far as your notices. Same thing. Is it near propane gas system? Are there any transfer fees? Is it in an HOA? Is it in a PID? Is it in a mud? Annexation, tidewaters, any of that kind of stuff, you would list that here. Okay. All right. So number 7 is property condition. Are you taking the property as is or not? Right. You have to have access. You have to be able to do inspections. We need to be able to check utilities, if there are utilities on this unimproved property, acceptance and what it means, and all that good stuff. Now, here's where it gets different. Okay. There's a seller's disclosure built into the contract. Okay. Now, when you're talking about unimproved land, there is no seller's disclosure like outside of this. So if I'm doing land, I'm not taking the TREC seller's disclosure notice that's talking about the dishwasher and the HVAC unit, and do you have any issues with your flooring? Because this is unimproved property, it's just land. So in the unimproved property contract, it actually has this built in. Okay. So it asks you, are you aware of flooding? And all 8 questions are very specific to land. And you're just in the seller is actually putting yes or no. So if you're the one that's offering on this property, you're actually filling this part in. Now, I will tell you this. When we get down to this part, you'll see what I mean. But when you can go ahead and initial everything. For example, like right here, you can go ahead and initial each page. But when I send unimproved property contracts, I leave this blank. I don't sign it yet. Because let's say I just think of the worst, honestly, in every situation, and I want to make sure that my clients are protected on the buying side. So what I do is I make sure that if this is not already inputted into the MLS and the transaction desk, which it should be, if it's not, then I don't have my client sign here. I have them initial everything so you can see the intent. But I need to see what your answers are to these questions right here, because what if you are aware that it's in a flood zone? And I don't see that on the MLS or something. I need to know this information before we all agree on a contract, because at the end of the day, if my client signs it and your client goes, and your client as the seller proceeds with executing that contract, then now my client is stuck, and you answer that you were aware of some of these negative things here that are in paragraph E. Okay, 1 through 8. So I actually leave it off so that the contract can't get executed until it gets sent back to me because we missed a signature. I do that on purpose. Now, on the listing side, I do not fill the offer out for the buyer agent, but I put in the private notes that this document is already pre-filled out in the transaction desk, because before you actually offer, you need to know what we're putting in this seller's disclosure notice. I don't put anything else. Actually, yes, I do. I go ahead and fill out who my seller is. I go ahead and fill out the seller's disclosure notice here. And then I go ahead and take it a step further, and I go ahead and fill out my part here. That's it. Whew. Sorry. I don't fill out anything else, because everything else is really on the buyer. But the buyer is not going to change. There's no negotiation as to who my sellers are. There's no negotiations on the realtor contact information at the bottom, and there's no negotiation on what my client has to disclose. So I go ahead and fill that in, and I make note of that in the MLS so that no one is downloading this document and leaving this stuff blank because they don't know these answers. Okay. So that's just how I handle it. Paragraph 8: is anybody related to anybody in this contract? Are you representing someone that's a family member? What about a business or an entity or an LLC, something that's going to, you're the beneficiary, something like that. That's where you will go ahead and disclose this here. The closing date is just like the closing date in our regular 1 to 4 contract. When would you close? Residential land typically does close just like a house within about 30 days. Okay, sometimes sooner. I've seen sooner that wasn't necessarily cash, but it is definitely possible for it to be sooner. Special provisions in possession. We talk about not practicing law, but if your legal description is longer than what fits in that box in paragraph 2, if the sellers are longer than what the sellers' names are longer than what fits in paragraph 1, then you would just reference special provisions here. Our settlement and everything, fees and stuff like that we want the seller or buyer to pay, we would disclose all of this here. So if you want the seller to pay your commission instead of the listing agent, if you want the seller to provide seller's concessions, this is the new paragraph that they have us doing that in now. The rest of this is the exact same as what we see on our contract. If there are attorneys on the deal, we want to go ahead and disclose who they are, where they work, their phone numbers, emails, things like that. We want to make sure that we add all of the addenda that might be prevalent to this contract. We want to, I apologize. We want to put our buyer and seller's information and our information as the agents go here as well, so that when that title company reaches out to your buyer, they always have to also CC you. Now, down here in paragraph 23, this is where the attorneys go. Okay. Like I said, if this is not already in transaction desk for me, then I leave this blank and I send the offer so that there is intent behind it, and I just leave it alone. Okay. We fill this out because, we want to make sure both parties are getting paid, and then we get receipt of the earnest money, and that is literally it. That's it. That is the entire residential unimproved property contract. Okay. So now I'm going to switch gears. I'm going to switch gears and switch forms, actually, because I want to make sure that we understand these forms. So again, I'm in zip forms, and like I said, if you kind of took you a minute, when you don't want to create a whole new transaction, which is what I have here, I could go to new and I could create one. If you go up to the top right here, it says forms. You could just select one form and do what you need to do with that one form. You don't have to make a whole transaction if you don't want to. um I want to show you. Actually, no, I don't, because I want to stick to land. I'm sorry. Okay, so let me go ahead and pull up the MLS, which I have that ready for you. It's right here. We're going to go to our matrix. I apologize for that little segue. I was about to get deep into something and then I decided that's a whole new video. Okay, so at the top right here, you have your matrix and then you have your search toolbar. If you look, there's your commercial sales and commercial leases here, but then here's land. When you click on land, it's all land. Unimproved, farmer, it's land. It's all the land out there that's not considered single family or on commercial, okay? So what I do every single time, if you notice, I'm unclicking all this active stuff. Active under contract, active kick out, and active contingent is still under contract. So if it's already taken, someone beat me to it, I don't want to see it. So I always just do active. If you look right here, this is where it gets a little specific for you. Are you looking for unimproved land? Are you doing land lease? Are you doing ranch? Or are you doing unimproved land? So we're working on unimproved land right now. Okay. We don't care anything about Louisiana because we are in Texas. Okay. And if you notice down here in the bottom left, my search results are still more than 5,000 around Texas. Okay. All right. So we are going to actually input a distance around Dallas. So let's go within 25 miles of Dallas, Texas. It should pop up and then you click it. Okay, there are 1,037 matches. Now, this side over here is where it gets a little interesting. You can do your price point, which is, if you notice, it has a 000 and the S here. So that's the hundreds of thousands. Okay. So if it's 100,000 is the max, then you would put $0 to 100,000. Okay, I'm sorry, you would just do 100. But if you're trying to be reasonable and you want to go to a kind of crowded area, so you're looking for 100 acres all the way up to, um, I'm sorry, $100,000 all the way up to, let's stop at $400,000. Okay, so now we're down to 459 matches. Okay, we're going to change our land size. Let's just say our client, for the sake of this transaction, wants 3 to 5 acres. Okay, just like that, I have 11 results. 25 miles within Dallas, that's between 100,000 and 400,000, with 3 to 5 acres. Specifically, it gives me 11 matches, but I don't want it to go down that fast. So now I know what's happening though. But now I can also do the lot dimensions. Again, going back to that new construction, some people will say, oh, this is a 75-foot lot or it's a 160-foot lot. What they mean is the length by the width. So sometimes people say, oh, it's a 50-foot lot because that's how wide the lot is. And then they just put a house right next to you. Or if they did 175 feet, then now that's how far the houses are away from each other. The depth of the price of the home is going to be the second number. So if I do 10 by 10 or 10 by 11, the 10 is going to be my width right in front of me. My 11 is going to be the length going to the back of that property line. Okay. Now, road frontage is literally the road that's on the front of the road. Okay. The land that's on a front, that's in front of the road. So if I'm talking about, I don't know, Main Street in Dallas, the road frontage, let's say on 1 acre, might literally be 20 feet or 25 feet, meaning that the land is super skinny because only 25 feet in front of that property is all that they're conveying over to the person that's buying. Okay. So typically, what you see on the average home for sale right now is the unimproved property road frontage is probably somewhere between 50 feet and like 150 feet, when really you want to get as much as you can. Okay. Now, is someone going to subdivide or will they subdivide? That is a big deal because if, let's say there's someone like me and they live on a farm, and I could say, well, 10 acres I will sell, the rest of it I will not. And yes, I will subdivide the 10 that you have now and pay for that plat. Okay. That's what we're talking about here. So let's just say I'm trying to buy this property from my mom, but I only need 2 acres and they're selling 25. Well, they could carve out those 2 acres and be on their side of the farm, and we could carve that 2 acres out and sell it to them. Now, number of lots, if you're trying to purchase, all the land in one area, you can go ahead and look for the lots and see, how many lots are being sold in that area. And then it has a lot description, things like that. So very, very, very simple things that we have definitely done before and things like that. So it shouldn't be too big of a jump as far as the learning curve. So thank you again for joining me. The biggest thing about land is that it's really, really difficult as far as the paperwork side at the beginning, and then it just goes away at the end. You honestly forget you're even under contract. The contracts can last up to 30 days, but it can be as short as 14. Okay, it's very, 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 very quick. But if you ever need anything, you already know to give me a call, give me a text, shoot me an email, whatever you got to do to get to me. Okay. Thank you again for joining me. You guys have a wonderful, wonderful day.